The metal walls of the escape pod shook violently as Hyunei gripped her safety harness with white knuckles. Red warning lights flashed everywhere, casting eerie shadows across her pale face. The tiny spacecraft tumbled through the orange sky of Kepler 442c like a broken toy, completely out of control. Just 20 minutes ago, she had been safely working in her laboratory aboard the research ship. Hyunei was a botanist from the Zephyrian colonies, studying rare plant specimens that could help feed her people. She loved her quiet work among the growing plants and scientific equipment. But everything changed when the raiders attacked. The pirates came out of nowhere, their black ships appearing like hungry wolves. They wanted the valuable research data and rare seeds aboard her vessel. Hyunei barely had time to grab her emergency kit before running to the escape pods. She could hear explosions echoing through the ship's corridors as she sealed herself inside the small pod and launched into space. Now she was paying the price for that desperate escape. The pod's computer kept announcing system failures in a cold mechanical voice. Hull breach detected. Life support systems at 60%, navigation offline. Each announcement made her heart sink deeper. Through the small window, she could see pieces of metal tearing away from the pod's outer shell. They sparkled like deadly confetti against the alien sky before disappearing into the wind. The atmospheric entry was supposed to be smooth and controlled, but nothing was working as designed. Hyunei felt her stomach drop as the pod suddenly tilted sideways. She was falling faster now, the ground rushing up to meet her like an angry fist. The rocky landscape below looked harsh and uninviting, with no signs of water or vegetation anywhere. Ancient mining equipment and abandoned structures dotted the surface like old bones in a desert. The impact came with a thunderous crash that threw her against the padded walls. Metal screamed against rock as the pod bounced and rolled before finally coming to rest upside down. For several moments everything was silent, except for the hissing of escaping air and the crackling of damaged electronics. Hyunei slowly opened her eyes, tasting blood in her mouth. Her head throbbed, and her left shoulder ached terribly. The pod's interior was now lit only by a few flickering emergency lights that made everything look ghostly and wrong. Sparks occasionally shot from broken control panels, filling the small space with the sharp smell of burning circuits. She tried to move and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her ribs, and she realized she might have a few broken bones. But she was alive, which was more than she had expected during those terrifying final moments of the crash. The pod's main computer was completely dead, its screen dark and silent, but some backup systems were still working, though barely. A weak orange light showed that life support was functioning at minimum levels. The air recycler wheezed and stuttered like an old man trying to breathe. Most frightening of all was the oxygen reading. The display showed she had maybe 6 days of breathable air left, and that was if nothing else broke down. The water recycler was damaged too, giving her perhaps 4 days of drinking water if she was very careful. Hyunei closed her eyes and tried not to panic. She was trained for emergencies, but this was far worse than anything she had practiced for. She was alone on a planet that had been abandoned for centuries, with failing life support and no way to call for help. The distress beacon was her only hope, but its signal was pathetically weak. The cold was getting worse every hour. Hyunei wrapped herself in the thin emergency blanket, but it felt like trying to stay warm with tissue paper. Her breath came out in small white puffs that froze on the inside walls of the damaged pod. Ice crystals had started forming around, the broken air vents creating strange patterns that reminded her of the frost flowers back home. She had been trapped for 3 days now, and each day felt longer than the last. The cramped space was driving her crazy. She could barely stretch her legs, and every movement sent sharp pains through her injured ribs. The pod was designed for short emergency trips, not for living in like some kind of metal coffin. Her hands shook as she worked on the distress beacon again. The tiny device was her lifeline, but it was badly damaged from the crash. She had managed to get it working yesterday, but the signal was so weak it probably wouldn't reach beyond this solar system. Still, she kept trying to boost its power, using parts from other broken equipment. The worst part was the silence. Back on her research ship, There had always been the gentle hum of engines, the soft beeping of computers, or the quiet chatter of her fellow scientists. Here the only sounds were her own breathing, and the occasional crack of metal as the pod settled into the rocky ground. She had tried to scan the planet for any signs of life, hoping to find plants or animals that might help her survive. But the sensors showed nothing except empty rock and ancient ruins. This world was truly dead, abandoned long ago when the mining companies pulled out. Even the air outside was too thin to breathe without a suit, which she didn't have. Water was becoming a serious problem. The recycler had stopped working completely on the second day, leaving her with only the emergency bottles. She was down to her last bottle now, taking tiny sips and trying to make it last. Her lips were already cracked and dry, and she felt dizzy whenever she stood up too quickly. Food wasn't much better. The emergency rations tasted like cardboard and were hard to swallow without enough water. She had been eating less each day, trying to stretch her supplies, but she knew it was hopeless. Even if she rationed everything perfectly, she would run out long before any rescue could arrive. Yesterday, she had started recording messages on her personal device. She told her family back on the Zephyrian colonies that she loved them. She thanked her research team for all the good times they had shared. She even recorded notes about her botanical research, hoping someone might find them useful someday. But today felt different. Today felt final. As she spoke into the recorder, her voice was barely above a whisper. "This is Hyun Ai, day 3 after the crash. If anyone finds this message, please tell my sister that I kept the pressed flower she gave me. It's still in my notebook, and thinking about it makes me feel less alone." She paused the recording and looked through the small window at the barren landscape outside. The orange sky was turning darker as this planet's strange sun set behind the mountains. Soon it would be night again, and the temperature would drop even more. The distress beacon continued its weak signal, calling out into the empty darkness of space. Hyunhee closed her eyes and tried to imagine that somewhere out there someone was listening. Jinwoo was elbow-deep in the guts of an old mining computer when the strange sound broke through his radio's usual crackling. He froze, his wrench halfway, to a loose bolt and listened carefully. For 8 months on this dead planet, the only voices he had heard were his own and the recordings he played to keep himself sane. But this was different. This was real. He quickly wiped the grease from his hands and turned up the volume on his jury-rigged communications setup. The signal was weak and full of static, but he could make out words in standard galactic language. Someone was calling for help, and they sounded desperate. Jinwoo had come to Kepler 442c when the big mining companies abandoned it, while everyone else fled to find work elsewhere. He saw opportunity in the mountains of discarded equipment they left behind. Rare metals, advanced computers, power cells that were worth a fortune on other worlds. It was dangerous work and lonely as hell, but it paid better than anything he could find back home. His base camp was set up inside an old processing facility that still had partial power. Over the months, he had turned it into a comfortable home with heated rooms, a well-stocked workshop, and even a small garden where he grew vegetables under artificial lights. He was good at making things work, at finding solutions when expensive. Parts weren't available. The transmission came again, clearer this time, a female voice speaking in the precise way that marked her as one of the educated alien species. She was hurt, trapped, running out of supplies. Jinwoo felt his chest tighten with familiar human instinct. Someone needed help, and he was the only one who could provide it. He grabbed his tablet and started working on triangulating the signal. His equipment wasn't military grade, but he had spent years learning how to coax maximum performance from salvaged parts. The signal was coming from the southeast, maybe 40 or 50 kilometers away. That was a long trip across dangerous terrain, but definitely possible with his modified rover. Jinwoo had built the rover himself from the chassis of an old mining transport. It wasn't pretty, but it was tough and reliable. Heavy armor plating protected against falling rocks, while oversized wheels could handle the worst ground conditions. He had even installed a small living compartment in the back with emergency supplies and medical equipment. As he loaded extra oxygen tanks and food supplies, Jinwoo thought about the voice on the radio. She sounded young and scared, but trying. Hard to stay professional. probably a scientist or researcher who had gotten caught up in some kind of trouble. Pirates were common in this sector, and civilian ships made easy targets. His hands moved quickly and efficiently, checking equipment and plotting routes on his navigation system. The direct path would take him through some unstable mining areas where the ground could collapse without warning. But going around would add hours to the journey, and the woman on the radio might not have hours to spare. Jinwoo paused for a moment, looking around his comfortable workshop. He had built a good life here, safe and profitable. Leaving meant risking his equipment, his supplies, maybe even his life. The smart thing would be to boost her signal and try to contact a proper rescue ship, but that could take days or weeks, and she sounded like she was already at the end of her rope. Besides, helping people in trouble wasn't about being smart, it was about being human. He sealed the last supply container and headed for the rover. The rover's engine growled as Jinwoo pushed it harder than usual across the broken landscape. Through the reinforced windshield, he could see nothing but endless stretches of orange rock and twisted metal. The abandoned mining world looked like a giant had taken a hammer to it, leaving behind a mess of craters, collapsed tunnels, and rusted machinery. His fuel gauge was already showing yellow after just 2 hours of driving. The rover was tough, but it wasn't built for speed or efficiency. Every detour around impassable terrain cost him precious fuel that he couldn't spare. He had brought extra tanks, but they wouldn't last forever if he kept hitting obstacles like this. The first major roadblock appeared as a massive pile of collapsed concrete and steel beams. It had once been some kind of processing plant, but now it stretched across his path like a concrete mountain. Jinwoo stopped the rover and climbed out to get a better look, his boots crunching on loose gravel. The pile was at least 20 meters, high and twice as wide. Going over it would be impossible, and blasting through would take equipment he didn't have. He would have to go around, adding another hour to his journey. As he climbed back into the driver's seat, he tried not to think about how much time the woman in the escape pod had left. The detour led him through what used to be the main mining complex. Huge excavators sat frozen in place like sleeping metal. Dinosaurs, their massive scoops still full of ore that would never be processed. Some had been there so long that the planet's harsh weather had stripped away their paint, leaving only bare metal that gleamed dully in the orange sunlight. Jinwoo's navigation system started beeping urgently as he approached a series of deep cracks in the ground. The mining operations had destabilized this entire area, and sinkholes could open up without warning. He slowed the rover to a crawl, carefully picking his way between the fissures while his heart hammered in his chest. One wrong move here would send him plunging into darkness, and nobody would ever find his body. The dust storm hit him just as he cleared the dangerous ground. It came out of nowhere, a wall of orange particles that turned day into night in seconds. Jinwoo quickly switched on his headlights and emergency beacon, but he could barely see 5 meters ahead. The rover's air filters started working overtime, their whining almost drowning out the engine noise. He had to slow down even more now, feeling his way forward like a blind man. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. In conditions like this, it would be easy to drive off a cliff or into a hidden obstacle. But stopping wasn't an option. Every minute he delayed was another minute, closer to the woman's death. The storm lasted for nearly an hour, coating everything in a fine layer of grit that got into every crack and crevice. When it finally cleared, Jinwoo found himself in unfamiliar territory. His GPS showed he had drifted off course, but the signal from the escape pod was definitely stronger now. He could hear her voice more clearly through the static, and what he heard made him push the accelerator harder. She was talking to herself, rambling about her family and her work. People only did that when they thought nobody was listening anymore. Jinwoo keyed his radio transmitter, hoping she could hear him. "Hold on," he said into the microphone. "Help is coming." The first rays of the alien sun were painting the rocky landscape in shades of gold and orange when Jinwoo finally spotted the escape pod. His rover's headlights swept across the crash site, revealing a scene that made his stomach clench with worry. The small spacecraft had hit the ground hard, leaving a long scar in the dirt before coming to rest against a pile of boulders. The pod was crumpled like a tin can, its once smooth hull now dented and torn in dozens of places. Scorch marks from Atmospheric entry streaked along its sides, and Jinwoo could see where pieces of the heat shield had been ripped away during the violent descent. It was a miracle that anyone inside had survived at all. He parked the rover as close as possible and grabbed his emergency kit. The silence was eerie after hours of engine noise, broken only by the whisper of wind across the barren landscape. As he approached the wreckage, he could hear faint sounds from inside. Shallow breathing, the occasional weak cough, and what sounded like delirious mumbling. "Hello?" he called out, pressing his face against the small viewport. "Can you hear? Me in there?" The response was barely audible, just a weak groan that told him someone was still alive. Through the cracked glass, he could make out a figure slumped in the pilot's seat. It was a young woman with the pale blue skin and pointed ears that marked her as Zephyrian. Her lips were cracked and bloodless, and her breath came out in small puffs of vapor that showed just how cold it had gotten inside the pod. The main hatch was completely jammed, twisted out of shape by the impact. Jinwoo ran his hands along the metal seams, looking for a way in. The emergency release had failed, and the manual override was buried under a sheet of bent metal. He would have to cut his way through. Back at his rover, Jinwoo pulled out his plasma cutter. It was a crude tool made from salvaged mining equipment, but it could slice through most metals if he was patient. He also grabbed a portable heater, medical supplies, and a tank of emergency oxygen. This woman was in bad shape, and every second counted. The cutting work was slow and careful. One wrong move could send sparks flying into the pod's atmosphere, or worse, injure the person inside. Jinwoo talked constantly as he worked, his voice calm and reassuring despite the urgency he felt. "My name is Jinwoo," he said, the plasma cutter throwing blue sparks across his face. "I'm human, and I'm here to help you. I picked up your distress signal yesterday and drove all night to reach you. You're going to be okay." He wasn't sure if she could hear him, but he kept talking anyway. He told her about his rover, about his base camp, about how he had plenty of food and medical supplies waiting for her. Anything to let her know that she wasn't alone anymore. When the hatch finally gave way, a wave of freezing air rushed out of the pod. The woman was unconscious now, her skin pale and cold to the touch. Jinwoo quickly wrapped her in thermal blankets and connected an oxygen mask to help her breathing. Her pulse was weak but steady. "You made it," he whispered, lifting her carefully from the wreckage. "You're safe now." The rescue was just beginning, but for the first time in days, someone was no longer alone on this empty world. Hyunei woke, up feeling warm for the first time in days. The sensation was so unexpected that she lay still for several minutes, just enjoying the gentle heat that surrounded her like a comfortable blanket. Her ribs still ached, and her throat felt like sandpaper, but she was definitely alive. She opened her eyes to find herself in a room that shouldn't have existed on this dead planet. Soft lighting came from panels in the ceiling, and the air smelled fresh and clean instead of the metallic tang she remembered from the escape pod. The bed beneath her was actually comfortable, with real sheets and a thick mattress that felt like luxury after days cramped in twisted metal. "You're awake," came a gentle voice from nearby. Jinwoo was sitting in a chair beside the bed, and she could see the relief in his dark eyes. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a cargo hauler," she managed to croak, her voice barely above a whisper. "But alive. Thank you for saving me." Jinwoo smiled and handed her a cup of water. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted, cool and pure, and exactly what her dehydrated body needed. As she drank, she looked around the room with growing amazement. The walls were metal, clearly part of some old industrial building, but Jinwoo had transformed the space into something that felt like home. Colorful fabric hangings covered the bare metal, and small plants grew in containers along one wall. The lighting was warm and adjustable, nothing like the harsh fluorescence that mining facilities usually had. "Where are we?" she asked. "My home," Jinwoo replied simply. "It used to be a mineral processing plant, but the mining company abandoned it when they pulled out. I've been fixing it up for the past 8 months." Over the next few days, as Hyun-ai regained her strength, Jinwoo showed her around his incredible creation. What had started as an empty industrial shell was now a fully functional living space. that would have impressed engineers from any advanced civilization. The environmental systems were masterpieces of human ingenuity. Jinwu had taken atmospheric processes designed for mining operations and modified them to create perfect living conditions. The air was always clean and fresh, with just the right amount of humidity. Temperature controls kept every room comfortable, powered by geothermal taps he had drilled himself. His workshop was even more impressive. Workbenches lined the walls, covered with tools that were part human engineering and part alien technology. He had somehow figured out how to make Zephyrian computers work with human power systems, creating hybrid devices that performed better than either original design. "How did you learn to do all this?" Hyunei asked, watching him repair a damaged air recycler with parts from 3 different species technology. Jinwu shrugged, focused on his work. "Necessity, mostly. When you're alone on a planet with no supply ships, you either learn to fix things or you die. Humans are pretty good at making do with whatever we have available." The food storage areas were stocked with supplies that would last for months. Jinwu had even created a small hydroponic garden where fresh vegetables grew under artificial sunlight. He shared everything without question, as if helping a stranded stranger was the most natural thing in the world. "You don't have to do all this for me," Hyunei said one evening as they ate dinner together. Jinwu looked surprised by the comment. "Of course I do. You needed help and I was able to provide it. That's what people do for each other." It was such a simple statement, but it revealed something profound about human nature that Hyunei had never fully understood before. By her second week of recovery, Hyunei was feeling strong enough to walk around Jinwu's incredible facility. Her ribs had healed enough that she could move without wincing, and the color had returned to her pale blue skin. More importantly, her scientific mind was buzzing with curiosity about everything Jinwu had built. "This communication array is fascinating," she said, studying the massive antenna system he had constructed on the roof. "But I think we could boost its range significantly if we adjusted the signal processing algorithms." Jinwu looked up from the control panel he was rewiring, grease smudged across his cheek. "You know about communications engineering?" "Zephyrian universities require all scientists to study multiple disciplines," Hyunei explained. "I'm primarily a botanist, but I have advanced training in electronics and signal theory. Our approach tends to focus on mathematical perfection and elegant design principles." That afternoon, they began working together on improving the communication system. Hyun-ae was amazed by how differently Jinwu approached engineering problems compared to what she had learned in school. Where Zephyrian engineers would spend weeks calculating the perfect theoretical solution, Jinwu would build a rough prototype in hours and then improve it through testing. "This power coupling shouldn't work according to the textbooks," Hyunei said, examining one of Jinwu's modifications. "The impedance mismatch should cause massive signal loss." Jinwu grinned and flipped a switch. The signal strength meter immediately jumped to nearly double its previous reading. "Sometimes the textbooks are wrong. I found this configuration by accident when I was trying to fix a broken mining scanner. It works better than the original design." Working together, they combined Hyunei's theoretical knowledge with Jinwu's practical experience. She helped him understand why his modifications worked so well, while he showed her tricks that no engineering professor had ever taught. Their hybrid approach created solutions that neither could have developed alone. The breakthrough came when they were trying to solve a persistent interference problem. Hyunei's careful mathematical analysis identified the source of the noise, while Jinwu's intuitive understanding of salvaged equipment provided the fix. The result was a communication array that could reach clear across the solar system with crystal-clear signal quality. "Your people build things to last forever," Jinwu observed as they tested another improvement. "Everything is over-engineered and perfect from the start. Humans build things to work right now, and then we fix them when they break." "That seems inefficient," Hyunei said, though she was beginning to see the advantages of Jinwu's approach. "Maybe," Jinwu admitted, "but it also means we can adapt quickly when situations change. Your escape pod was built to handle normal emergency landings, but not a crash like yours. My rover was built from mining equipment that was never meant to be a rescue vehicle, but it got the job done because I could modify it as needed. As the days passed, they worked on dozens of other projects together. Hyun-A helped optimize the power distribution system using advanced Zephyrian energy management protocols. Jinwoo showed her how to repair almost anything with basic tools and creative thinking. They improved the atmospheric processes, upgraded the workshop equipment, and even enhanced the hydroponic garden. "You know," Hyun-A said one evening as they reviewed their progress, "this collaboration has taught me more about practical engineering than 4 years of university courses." Jinwoo smiled as he cleaned his tools. "That's the thing about humans. We're not the smartest species in the galaxy or the most advanced, but we're really good at figuring things out as we go along." Their partnership was creating something remarkable, and both of them knew it. The enhanced communication array crackled to life on a quiet morning, filling Jinwoo's workshop with the clear tones of an incoming transmission. After weeks of sending out distress signals with no response, the sudden contact made both Hyun-A and Jinwoo freeze in excitement. "This is Captain Taemin of the Zephyrian patrol vessel Swift Current," came the crisp voice through the speakers. "We have received your emergency transmission. Please identify yourself and state your condition." Hyun-A practically leaped toward the microphone, her hands shaking with relief. "Captain Taemin, this is botanist Hyun-A from Research Vessel Garden of Knowledge. My ship was destroyed by raiders 3 weeks ago, and I crash-landed on Kepler 442c. I'm alive and in good health thanks to human assistance." The pause that followed was so long that Jinwoo wondered if the transmission had been lost. When Captain Taemin finally responded, his voice was filled with disbelief. "Hyun-A? We've been searching for survivors since we found the wreckage of your research ship. Are you saying you've been rescued by a human on an abandoned world?" "More than rescued," Hyun-A replied, looking at Jinwoo with genuine warmth. "I've been working with Jinwoo for the past 2 weeks. He's created an incredible facility here, and we've made some remarkable technological advances together." Over the next hour, they guided the patrol ship to their location, using the enhanced navigation beacon they had built. Jinwoo couldn't help but feel nervous as the sleek Zephyrian vessel descended through the atmosphere. He had spent months alone on this world, and the idea of meeting an entire crew of aliens was both exciting and intimidating. Captain Taemin was a tall, dignified Zephyrian with the silver-tinged skin that marked him as middle-aged by his species standards. He emerged from his ship expecting to conduct a medical evacuation of a traumatized survivor. Instead, he found Hyun-A looking healthier than she had in years, enthusiastically giving him a tour of what she called the most innovative research facility in the sector. "This atmospheric processing system shouldn't be possible," Captain Taemin said, examining Jinwoo's environmental controls with obvious amazement. "You've somehow integrated mining equipment with life support systems from 3 different species. The efficiency readings are beyond anything our engineers have achieved." Jinwoo felt his cheeks redden at the praise. "It's just practical problem-solving, really. When you don't have the right parts, you make do with what's available." The captain's inspection continued through the workshop, where hybrid human Zephyrian devices hummed quietly on every workbench. Jinwoo and Hyun-A demonstrated their improved communication array, showing how it could maintain clear contact across distances that would challenge military-grade equipment. "The theoretical principles behind this signal processing are fascinating," Captain Taemin mused, studying their technical notes. "How you've combined human intuitive engineering with Zephyrian mathematical precision. The results are genuinely revolutionary." What impressed the captain most was the partnership itself. He watched Jinwoo and Hyun-A work together seamlessly, finishing each other's sentences and solving complex problems with an efficiency that came from weeks of collaboration. They had created something that neither species could have achieved alone. "Hyun-A," the captain said finally, "the Zephyrian Science Council has been looking for new approaches to our engineering challenges. This collaboration could change how we think about multi-species cooperation." Jinwoo listened quietly as they discussed the implications of their work. He had started this journey simply trying to help someone in trouble, but somehow he had stumbled into something much bigger. The rescue ship had arrived, but Jinwoo realized that this might just be the beginning of a much larger adventure. The rescue ship prepared for departure, Captain Taemin made Jinwoo an offer that would have changed his life completely. The Zephyrian Science Council wanted him to come to their homeworlds, to work in their most advanced laboratories, and share his unique engineering approaches with their top scientists. You could have access to unlimited resources, the captain explained as they stood in Jinwoo's workshop. The finest equipment, the brightest minds in the galaxy, research budgets that most scientists can only dream about. Your techniques could revolutionize how we approach engineering challenges. Jinwoo was quiet for a long moment, looking around at the facility he had built with his own hands. Every piece of equipment told a story of problems solved and obstacles overcome. The workbenches were scarred from countless projects, and the walls were lined with hybrid devices that existed nowhere else in the universe. "I appreciate the offer, Captain," he finally said. "But this place has become my home. I've put 8 months of work into making it functional, and there's still so much more I could do here." Hyun-A stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "What if you didn't have to choose? What if we could bring the best of both worlds together?" Her proposal was brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of taking Jinwoo away from his adopted planet, why not establish a permanent research outpost? Right here? The facility already had everything needed for advanced scientific work, and Jinwoo's practical engineering could complement traditional Zephyrian research methods. Within days, the plan was approved by the Science Council. Jinwoo's abandoned. Mining World would become the first joint human-Zephyrian research station, with him as chief technical advisor. Hyun-A volunteered to stay as head of biological studies, eager to continue their successful collaboration. The transformation that followed was remarkable. Transport ships began arriving weekly, bringing supplies, equipment, and scientists from across Zephyrian space. But instead of replacing Jinwoo's improvised systems, they enhanced and expanded them using his design principles. The old processing facility grew into a complex of interconnected buildings, each one incorporating Jinwoo's practical approach to engineering. Solar collectors made from salvaged mining equipment powered laboratories filled with the most advanced scientific instruments. Atmospheric processors that Jinwoo had built from scrap were upgraded with Zephyrian technology, creating environmental systems that were both highly efficient and incredibly reliable. Other species began taking notice. Kelatari traders stopped by to examine the hybrid communication systems. Vraxian engineers requested detailed reports on the power distribution networks. Even the proud Celestial Empire sent observers to study what they called the human approach to practical problem-solving. Jinwoo found himself teaching regular classes to visiting scientists, showing them how to think beyond textbook solutions. His workshops became famous throughout the sector, with waiting lists that stretched for months. Students learned to look at broken equipment not as failures, but as opportunities to create something better. The key is not being afraid to experiment. Jinwoo would tell his classes, holding up a device that combined human, Zephyrian, and Kelatari components. Every species has developed amazing technologies, but they usually stay separate. Magic happens when you start mixing them together. The research station published papers that changed engineering practices across dozens of worlds. Jinwoo's name appeared in textbooks alongside the greatest inventors in galactic history. But the achievement he was most proud of was much simpler. He had proven that being human meant never giving up, no matter how impossible the challenges seemed. Sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from the most advanced laboratories, but from one person's determination to help another. On this forgotten world, that determination had changed everything.